Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Leadership Reimagined, where we explore innovative approaches to leadership across a variety of industries and professions. I'm Cassie Crosby, the founder of Vertex Leadership Lab, and I'm thrilled to be speaking today with the brilliant and creative Tanya Hart, the visionary behind Oomph Salon, an award-winning entrepreneur and thought leader who's been making waves in the beauty industry for more than 20 years.
How old am I? That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to dive into how Tanya redefined leadership in her field, her approach to innovation, and what drives her passion for elevating both the beauty industry as well as the wonderful people that she surrounds herself with. So, Tanya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we jump in, can you just share a bit about yourself and your journey, your passion for the beauty industry, and what led you to create your salon?
Yeah. So I've been in the industry since, 20 years ago. I had moved home from California. I had had a lot of retail jobs and whatnot. And I had always wanted to do hair. And my whole family kind of discouraged me from doing so because they thought I was too smart, right? Like there's this whole
Yeah.
stigma attached to hairdressing where, you see it in movies a lot. They're not very intelligent. They're like ditzy, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I had this amazing opportunity to manage a salon, and then I found out within that salon that I could apprentice in the state of New Hampshire to get my license. I somehow conned one of my employees into being my instructor. I'm completely self-taught. And then from
Yeah.
there, I kind of like worked in a lot of different models of salons, like commission based. I was a independent contractor, which is really popular in my industry. And I had just kind of like worked at a lot of salons that were not necessarily working out, like, through poor leadership, and, I often find that is a theme in the beauty industry, and it got to the point one day when I was, doing a client's hair, and I was a booth renter at the time, and I was broke, I was
Mhm.
uninspired, I was kind of, like, feeling like the end of my journey was coming, and I wanted to get into some kind of, like, sales job, and she was like, "Well, who's gonna do my hair?" And then that weekend, I had had brunch with a couple of girlfriends that I had worked with previously, and they were like, "What's holding you back from opening your own place? Like, you haven't been with us for 3 years, like, that was something that you always said that you wanted to do." Kinda like when I began my independent journey, I had always thought, "I'm gonna open my own salon." And at that time, like, I had a baby at home, I was in a marriage that wasn't doing so well, so I had a lot of fear holding me back. And then, in conversing with my client, like kind of going back to her and back to that conversation with my friends, I started to explore that notion of, should I open my own salon? Can I open my own salon? What does that look like? And, leaving my girlfriend's that day, she had like this little space that she was working out of. And I went to go look at
Mhm.
it. It didn't feel right to me. But then, like walking out of her space, there was this beautiful space on the corner that was, 850 square feet. It was a lot bigger than I wanted it to be, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I used to park my car down there and, like, walk to my other salon, and I finally just grew up the courage to, like, go and talk to that landlord, and he didn't want a salon there because of the, salons don't do well.
Mhm.
Only
Mhm.
30% of them last longer than 2 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and 67% of them run unprofitably every single year. I sat with that client who, asked me like what I was going to do because who would do her hair. And she had offered to give me a loan. And in the grand scheme of things, like she offered me a loan for $7,500, which and I know is not a lot of money to start a business. But
Yeah.
as somebody believed in me that much, I felt like I had to take the opportunity to do it, right? Like I feel like oftentimes we're given a lot of opportunities in life that we don't see and we just don't take them. And for me,
Mm.
like it was this nagging feeling all the time. So I like sat down with her, gave her a few different proposals. She offered to give me $7,500 and then I just made it work. Like I went to that landlord, "You're going to love me," signed the lease, gave him basically almost all of the $7,500 for the first last month's security deposit. And then I bought everything else on Craigslist. I started
Yeah.
as for chairs, 850 square feet. I started with independent contractors that came to work for me. I realized I had created something really special. There was a lot of demand for what I was doing. So then I added 2 more stations and I started to hire on W-2 employees and started training them like as assistants underneath me. And that was in 2014. In 2018, I had to move into a much larger location. So we went from 850 square feet to 2,000 square feet. And then by that was June 2018. By
Right.
October, I had signed a lease for the second floor too, which was another 2,000 square feet. And now I have a 26 chair salon. I have, I don't even know how many hairstylists work for me. I've got
Mhm.
a lot. Baby. I have another business that I actually moved down the hall. That's a 3,000 square foot spa, which is kind of like Financial Alchemy or like yin and yang.
Yeah.
I do consulting work because what I'm doing in my industry is in the top 2% of what our industry does. And I've been nationally recognized for our culture, and I do consulting work, and then I launched a podcast. So,
Yeah. What
yeah.
an incredible journey. What I find so interesting is I had some of the same stigma associated with going in the army, actually.
Yeah.
There was that kind of like, you're smarter than that, and only people who have no other options, which I kind of felt like that's the only option I had.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy how these stigmas get put on people just for the job. And you
Mhm.
don't consider like what is the potential that this person has. Like if you're smart, of course you're gonna figure it out.
And it is really interesting. I see that a lot. And I think also, like, when my family was younger, it was like, you got pregnant as a teenager. This is
Mhm.
what you did. You went into hairstyling because it was easy. And
Mhm.
one of the things that has driven me to be so successful in what I do is breaking that stigma. And I'm like, I know in this industry, we have the license to print money, and I want people to view us as professionals. And I think that part of what I've done here is, creating a salon, unlike a lot of other salons, even in the benefits that I offer. I want to make sure that being able to hire people into career positions. I'm able to offer them health insurance, life insurance, gray with employer match, like things that other salons aren't doing. And I've successfully been able to do that. I remember when I
Yeah.
rolled out our first health insurance plan, I was like crying that day. I was like, oh my God, look at we made it. I can offering health
Yeah.
insurance,
Well,
which
that's
is
part of like professionalizing the force, right? Like offering things that change people's lives.
well, it's a female dominant industry. And
Mhm.
you must have seen that in the army as well. It's like we aren't taken care of as much. We aren't given the skills, we've been taught to rely on our romantic partners to like help
Mhm.
carry your life. And I was like, I want people to feel financially independent and strong in like so many ways. And this was just a way that I could like empower them to do so. So
Yeah,
yeah.
well, you're certainly not someone today that I would overlook. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had this exponential growth, and it's just amazing to hear how, like, for the pieces to come together to really light that path that got you where you are today, which is, you're an industry leader, you've been recognized as an innovator. And so I'm really curious with that, how do you define leadership? And then what does that look like for you day to day?
So how do I define leadership? Like you had asked me this question the other day, and it's like I just try
Mm,
to do things that are different, like taking a lot of time. Like, I don't know all of the answers. I tell everybody that up front. Like, I'm a very human being. I don't know all the answers, but I'm open to feedback and learning how I can do more, how I can help people thrive, how I can help feed people's gifts. I'm very introspective. Like, every year, I take a little sabbatical, I go on a trip, and then I do some planning for the following year. And I'll take a look at all of our wins and losses for the year and just try to figure out what worked and what didn't work, and then just being able to look at my team and being like, okay, I think a lot in business, we have this idea of like, our team needs to be like this. We need people to like
mhm.
I hear this a lot. Like, people are so frustrated, like, oh, I can't find anybody who can do what I can do. And that's not the expectation. Like, the expectation should be like, okay, this person can be 65% of who I am.
Yeah.
And then what are they really good at that I'm not good at? Like, can we feed those things? And then we somehow find the balance. And I think oftentimes in leadership, the leaders wanna be up here. I don't wanna be there. I wanna be here. I wanna be working
Yeah.
along my team. I wanna be growing their gifts, and at the end of the day, like, not only do they thrive, but I end up thriving by proxy. It's just like
Mhm.
it's like a really beautiful symbiotic kind of relationship.
Yeah, and it's such a non-traditional approach to leadership too, when you think about really traditional leadership models, sort of that hierarchical approach. But the three things that I heard you say, which have been so important, are feedback, learning, and then that introspective piece, right? Like reflecting on how am I impacting people and what is it I really want? And, sort of this ongoing process of lifelong growth.
It's like, I think, people often in leadership, they're like, I have all the answers. I know all the answers. I
Mhm.
need it to be done XYZ. And like, we have a lot of good ideas as leaders, right? This is how we got to where we
Yeah.
are, is by having those like really grand ideas and having that drive and that ambition.
So was there a particular moment when you realized I'm not just leading my salon, which is in and of itself this huge job, but that now, I'm influencing the future of the industry as a whole?
I don't know if there's been a singular moment. I just think it's like having all of these benchmarks that I've been hitting that, weren't even necessarily benchmarks, but just all of these things where I was like, oh, I'm now offering health insurance and oh, I offer paid time off, or even something silly like when I first opened the doors, we were the only ones doing online booking at the time. And it's like I'm willing to take all of these risks and try all of these things. And then along the way, a lot of other people have reached out to me, whether it's been hairstylists or barbers or other salon owners, business owners in town are like, how are you doing what you're doing? Like, it's so great what you're doing. Like, oh, you really inspire me. And I'm like, well, you can do the same thing. And then we like sit down and I realized I've been making an impact and like a wave, like not only in my industry, but also in the community. And it's people have these like self limiting beliefs. And I
Mhm.
think it's just like in, just putting myself out there. And I think that's the thing. I just put myself out there in transparency, like, all the time, and I think it's
Yeah, me
just,
too.
one of those things where people see me and I'm pretty relatable and I'm down to earth, and I think that helps
Yeah.
kinda bridge that gap and, it's giving my life
Yeah.
a purpose.
Yeah, and they're like, "She's doing these amazing things, and she's so relatable, maybe I can do that too."
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
salon owner reach out to me a couple of years ago, and she had been to all these, like, summits and seminars and, XYZ, and she was, like, struggling, and she's like, "I just don't" she's like, "You just seem to have this, like, X factor, and, like, what is it that you're doing?" And I like, in
Mm,
my communications with her, it was just like, I guess I don't realize that I have that. I'm just
mm.
doing the things that people aren't doing. Like, I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm willing to fail to get to
Yeah.
where I need to be, like, finding that humility.
Risk-taking is such a huge part of success. I just don't think you can get there without it.
I think it's so important for people to see your failures. We see wins all the
Yeah.
time. Nobody sees your failures.
For women, not to be binary about it, but we are rewarded socially growing up for playing it safe and playing it small. And then you get out into this world and it's like, no, you realize you really do have to play big and you really do have to take risks. And so I want to shift a little bit to talk about your brand and not just your business brand, but also who you are. And so, as you get out in the world and you think about how you're shaping your own brand and then how the business is growing along beside you, how does that reflect your vision for the future? And then how do you ensure that your brand remains as authentic as possible as your industry continues to evolve?
I think it's again like, what is the brand? Like, what is the true brand? People are like, oh, it's the logo, it's the look, it's the feel, of like all the external factors. At the end of the day, your brand is so much more than that. It's like your legacy, right? It's like the
Yeah.
feeling that people get when they walk in your door. And Oomph has always been the cornerstone of innovation and, kind of rock and roll energy, high energy, and doing things that a lot of people aren't doing. And I think as I've grown, we talk about kind of how I opened Ash Alchemy, and Ash Alchemy is like the yin yang of what Oomph is, right? So Ash Alchemy is more like gentle, and, nourishing. It's all holistic and organic, like products and stuff like that there. Because, I've gotten to a point in my life where I was like, all right, I had the opportunity to open this spa with a friend. Unfortunately, she ended up pulling out of the project for various reasons. And then I was kind of like, spent like time reinventing the wheel because I'm a cosmetologist, I'm a hairstylist, right? Like I know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I do run a multi-million dollar salon, but opening the spa brand, I was kind of like, oh shoot, what do I do? I don't know anything about aesthetics. I don't know anything about massage. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll just need to create space for like a kind of place that I would want to go to for my own healing, which was a big
Mhm.
my journey 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then like, having the 2 brands together and then, like, what is my personal brand is, like, a perfect collaboration of both of them,
Yeah.
and I think it's, like, if you've met me, like, you've met me, covered in tattoos, like, heads
Mhm.
like, I'm running out of space.
You're badass.
Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
motorcycle and,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
whatever, but, like, I am sober, I'm, like, down
Yeah.
to I am such a mom. I'm like soccer mom, loudest one on the sidelines. I love bird
Yeah.
watching. I love being in the woods. Like I love just
Yeah.
river, like those are things that I like. And I think that if you step into any of the businesses, you just kind of see like what that looks like. How do we stay authentic to that vision long term? How do we continue that? And I think again, it's just staying authentic. like making sure that every decision that you're making aligns with your why and your values. I think there's oftentimes, especially when I'm mentoring people, that they're like, oh, well, I can't hire anybody, but this person off the street wants to come in, but they can only work 2 hours a week. And I was like, okay, then why are you sacrificing
Right.
vision, your why, your values to satiate this quick need? You're just diminishing your brand, diminishing your
Right.
reputation and what your growth could look like. And if you just stay authentic to yourself, I feel like everything else just starts to fall in line. You just can't waver from it.
Have to trust your gut sometimes on that.
That's another
Yeah.
taught not to do.
Right. I think sometimes, our gut can be our biases speaking, but if you hear your gut speaking, it can be really helpful to pause and just go, what is my gut telling me right now? And what is the evidence I have that what it's saying is true?
Yep.
Instead of just going, I feel that, but I'm just going to move on and do whatever. Yeah. And I love that when I talk about what is a personal brand. And I love Steve Jobs' quote, which is, a personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. Right? It's
Oh,
how people experience you. I mean, that's sort of how you also describe your salon, like how people feel when they walk in.
mhm.
Right.
And those
Yeah.
reviews, like those Google reviews that we get where it was like, oh, like, it's not like any other salon. I, like, walked in and it was, like, so warm and everybody's friendly and they said hi to me and they were so helpful, and I was like, "That's it. Like, that's the brand.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the foundation of, like, what we're doing out here, and, like, that's what sets us apart," which is really weird.
You have a reputation for really blending creativity and business acumen. You had this big event, was it last week?
Creative workshop.
That's right, creative workshop. Yeah. And so how do you really manage the tension between staying creative and building a business?
I think it's important to find balance, right? Keep things fun and enlightening. Every year I take this long weekend and I go out west and I do a couple power hours in the morning and spend some time to play. I went to Palm Springs a couple years ago,
Mhm.
worked from about 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 or 10. And then I had the rest of the day to myself, going to the zoo and going for hikes, thrifting, checking out Frank Lloyd Wright's house. I love architecture and design, you know,
Yeah.
to balance like the fun and play. And then finding that kind of time within the business as well. So, we often work and work and work, and like businesses will have meetings, right? Because communication is important. And what I try to do is I try to center time around like team building instead, like
Mm.
creative team building. Like, we're going to do this. We do that creative workshop once a year. I think that's like spending time for play and for fun. It keeps
Yeah.
the monotony low. And I don't do like meetings for like housekeeping and stuff. We try to keep it pretty creative. That's why the creative workshop was born, actually. It was
Mhm.
like, built on this notion of like, we are all creative types here in this business, but you're doing like the same clients over and over again, like the root colors, the balayages. And as much
Mhm.
as I love doing something like that, sometimes it's nice to like push ourselves out of our comfort level or
Yeah.
zone, do the things that are super creative. And then it's like a, this big team building thing. And it's just so much fun. Like, we do it every year and, everybody gets
Mhm.
paid, take them out to
Yeah.
dinner. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I saw I saw the pictures. It looked like you guys had an amazing time. Yeah. And it seems like you've also taken on a role in mentoring other people within the industry. And so how do you inspire creativity and leadership in the people you mentor, especially those that are just coming in?
Yeah. I think it's, finding ways where they can be innovators in what they're doing. So, in this industry and in a lot of industries, when you open a business, it's like this fire that you have. You're like, oh, I got to open my own business. Or like, there's so many reasons why you decide to go out on your own.
Yeah.
And what we often do is we try to mirror our businesses after the businesses that we've been in. Even though they failed us, we still mirror them, the way we
Mhm.
compensate people, the way that we create services and pricing. And so that's something that I'll often challenge people to do. Like, let's sit down and be like, okay, well, this didn't work over here. I'm mentoring a barber right now, which is a part of the industry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most of our mentorship calls are like, well, how can we do this differently? Right? Like, I'm not a barber. So then I'll challenge her to think of different ways that she can do things in her hiring process that
Mhm.
sets apart from what other barbershops are doing. Her pricing
Yeah.
system, and that allows some creativity in there. And she's been just having a blast and she's killing it. And she's moved into a bigger space and it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, you're such a disruptor. There's such a theme of like just do different. And really, there's so much out there all this help available to help you build a business. And it's all based on some model that's already been done that looks like everything else. And that's maybe a way to make money, but it's not really a way to make a huge impact, right? Like,
Yeah, and, to me, it's like, I don't know, like, I've just always been like that. Like, I know that I'm built differently, but I've never felt like I've ever truly fit in maybe to, like, one size fits all model, like,
yeah,
a lot of my friends growing up were boys. I was pretty tomboyish, like,
yeah,
outdoorsy and whatever. Um, I just never I've just always I'm always thinking outside the box, like, always critically thinking. I've never been one to fall in line with things, and so it's been easy for me to do that, but I'm the kind of person where I have to learn by hitting all the branches on the way down. We talked about this the other day, like, I
yeah,
gotta fire, like, 3
yep,
times to figure out if it's too hot to touch, and I don't know how else to be, but there is so many things out there, like, I'm creating a wet line right now on top of everything else that I'm doing, conditioners and whatnot, and in this day and age, it's really easy to, like, white label a product, right? I'm
yeah,
not labeling, like, I've met with a chemist, these are the ingredients that I want, these are the things that I've researched. This is if I'm putting my name on it, I want it to be authentic to me. If you're doing things that are authentic to you and align with your values, the abundance and stuff just comes.
yeah,
How invested are you in that? I
right,
think
yeah,
true to yourself, there's this exponential growth that can happen for you and it's limitless,
yeah,
as opposed to like, say you open a franchise, you're only able to work within these parameters, right? No, I want limitless
mm.
potential.
Well, I mean, to hit every branch on the way down, you have to be willing to climb the tree and jump, right? And he's certainly done that. Um, and so looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation in your industry? And then what's next for you in the salon?
I think the biggest opportunities in my industry right now, we kind of talked the other day about technology and stuff like that. Like, I think it's kind of getting back to the basics and like human connection, right? It's
Mm,
a client experience. Like, how can we
right.
not just like get clients in and, use all this technology on them, but how can we go back to like, hey, Sandra, how are you today? Like, shaking their hand, like giving them a
Mm,
high five, making sure that they're heard, that they're cared for, because we live in such an artificial world. Everything's on social media. Those authentic connections are just kind of, they're not real anymore. I can't even
mm,
it's real anymore on social media sometimes. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, is that
yeah.
real? I don't even
Yeah,
know." And then even, like, how people portray themselves on social media can be really fake too. So I think
totally.
that client experience and getting back to some authenticity is huge for any
Yeah.
industry now, especially as we go into some of the things that we're facing, and real human connection is important.
Yeah. And I think that's what people want right now. There's all this potential and all these opportunities out there, but really at the end of the day, I mean, we lost so much of that in 2020 and 2021. And I
Right.
just think we're hungry for that.
It's our true nature.
Absolutely.
So we're kind of getting back to that.
And so if you had to sum up the legacy you want to leave in your industry, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I don't really know. Like, my spirit animal is the phoenix, so it's like am I allowed to swear?
Sure.
So, like, my life motto is always be a fucking phoenix, right?
Love
Like, if
it.
there's
Yeah.
anything I want people to learn from me and my
Mhm.
legacy is don't give up, and you can start over a million times, and sometimes you have to let it all burn to the ground and start over again, and that's what I want people to feel, finding that kind of strength.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly an example for that. Thanks. So, final question. You've taken some bold risks, done some really wild stuff, exponentially expanded your salon, leaped out on your own. And that's not always easy. There's a lot of fear of failure, fear of judgment. And that's often what holds people back. So, how do you let go of all that and just jump?
Delusion? It's just kind of like, people wait for this motivation, they wait for this spark. And sometimes it's like you just have to do it and then
Mhm.
everything else will fall in line. And it was like I was talking to my therapist about it a few weeks ago and like a couple of my team members here. It's like you have a finite amount of energy. So if you are constantly doing all these things that you don't love, you'll never make space. You'll never make the time to do what you want to do. And everybody's always like, well, I need to find the time and like I need to do this. If you just leap, all the chips will fall where they're supposed to, and you'll just figure it out. I know that that sounds hard, but
Mhm.
you're left with no choice, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
just jump
Something's
in,
got to
you're
give.
left with no choice but to swim. You just kind of figure it out as you go along and just being open to that failure and not really caring what anybody else thinks or says. And I think that that's one of the hardest things that you have to do. Well, what if they say this? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
this is life. You've got one life. You're the main character of it, and it's important for you to do you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today. You have such an incredible story. And I just really appreciate your time. And I'm excited for everyone to hear more about your story. So, for everyone listening, where can we hear more about you and your work and follow your journey?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I'm all over Instagram, Facebook, just Tanya Hart, TanyahArt. And you'll see like my multiple brands and everything.
And where's your salon?
It's in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Great. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you.
Take care.